Hello, I'm back, and tonight I was inspired to talk about a few records that I just pulled out of my archives. Every once in a while, as I mention in my videos, I go to my vast archives of records and pull out things that I forgot that I had. And it is like a little record store of my own. Sometimes I just discover these things that I forgot that I had, excuse me, or things that I knew that I had and wasn't aware of how rare they now are. Things aren't obviously always rare and worth a lot of money. But I pulled a few things out today, and I looked them up online, and I was shocked at what these records are going for now. So part of this is just me showing off. I like to show off things I have. It's kind of fun. But also, they're excellent classic albums, and I think I can give a unique spin to some of these albums and records and the music that's on them in terms of what I felt about them when they were released and how I felt about them over the years since they were released and how I feel about them right now in this moment. So, without further ado, there is more ado. I wanted to mention too, in my last video, I bitched and moaned a lot about other videos on YouTube that I basically just complained about how I think most YouTube videos are shit. And I still feel that way, but I want to counter that with some positivity and talk about some videos from people that I really enjoy. Now, when it comes to music, I don't see a lot of videos I enjoy, but there are a couple that I think, I watch them regularly. One of them posts videos almost every day, or pretty much every day. The other one is more sporadic. He'll post things and then not do anything for years or months. So he's kind of catch and go. But there are two that I want to recommend. One is Derek Vaughn. You spell his name Dereck and then Von. He's a dude in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think he's in his 60s. And he is really fun to watch. I would say without hesitation, he is my favorite person on YouTube who makes videos. And why do I say that? Because he knows his records. And to me, that's what matters most, is knowing your stuff and also having a wide selection of music. He loves music, man. And he's passionate about it. He knows a lot about it. He's been around it for a long time. He makes his own music. And he talks about his experiences with the music. He does show records, but he does a lot more than that. There are tons of people on YouTube, and this is what I don't like, are when people just show records. Like, here's this, here's this, here's this. To me, it's unbelievably boring. Talk about the music, have a connection to it. Tell us about what it means to you in your life, where you were at when you bought it, what it means to you personally, emotionally. That's what we want to know, right? In my opinion, that's what we should want to be talking about. And that's definitely what I want to be listening to. So Derek Vaughn, he's a great video maker. He makes videos similar to mine. He just sits here. He doesn't do a lot of flashy edits and cuts, and he doesn't do sound clips. He just talks about stuff. And he's very articulate, very opinionated. You don't have to agree with his opinions. It doesn't matter. You know, that is completely inconsequential to it. He has opinions, and to me, that's what matters. And you know, it is tough. It takes a little bit of balls to put yourself out there like this and have opinions on the internet, because as we all know, there are a lot of greasy, furry little trolls out there who don't have any creativity of their own, so they have to make fun of others because they don't have the energy or creativity to do what the video makers are doing. So it does take some balls to put yourself out there and have a firm opinion. And Derek Vaughn does that. Hopefully I do that. Derek Vaughn definitely does that. So check Derek Vaughn out. He knows his shit. He has a great selection. Mind-numbing selection, in fact. I mean, I'm around records. I've been around records for years, and every time I think I know everything there is to know, someone will teach me something. And Derek Vaughn is a teacher. He knows a lot about music, and he's got a vast selection. So check him out. The other one I really like is, his name is Sekko Funk. It's short for Secretary of Funk, but he spells it Sekofunk. And he's a dude in Washington, D.C., I think. Yeah, Washington, D.C., I think I've heard him say that. He's more sporadic with his videos. Derek Vaughn posts them every day. He's pretty much there every day. Sekko Funk will make videos, he'll make them like every day for a few days, and then he'll disappear for months. Then he'll come back. I mean, he's more sporadic. It seems like he's got a life, he's got shit to do. Not that Derek Vaughn doesn't, but Sekko Funk, he just makes videos and then he'll disappear. But when he makes videos, he is awesome. Again, he knows his shit. He has introduced me to a ton of music I had no idea about. And he has a real good delivery. He just sits down and he talks about music. There's not a lot of fluff. He just sits down and takes care of business. He spreads his wisdom and has a lot of records to talk about and a deep knowledge of his records. Just a vast selection of stuff. He mainly likes jazz, I think, and rhythm and blues and hip hop, and that seems to be in funk. That's the core of what he has, but he's all over the board too. He's got an amazing collection and he knows his shit. Again, to me, that's the key of any good video maker, is you know what you're talking about. Anyone can sit there like a douche and hold up records, but you need to know your shit. On the fly, too. All this information I throw at the screen, I don't have anything written down. I'm just sitting here going off the top of my head, and these guys do the same thing. And that's what I like. I don't want to feel like I'm watching someone who's reading off a cue card or something. You should know your shit before you sit down and make a video, and these guys do. So anyway, Sekko Funk and Derek Vaughn. Check those dudes out. Great collections, vast knowledge of music, and they know their shit. I really like those guys. And one of these days I would like to do some more videos on film. I'm a huge movie buff too, just as much as I am with music. There are a couple of video makers who focus on movies that I really enjoy, but I wanted to do a shout out to my favorite. His name's Daisuke Beppu. You spell his first name D-A-I-S-U-K-E, and then Beppu, B-E-P-P-U. He's a Japanese dude in Tokyo. He's one of those guys that's so fun to watch and is so articulate, and he's such an interesting personality that he can sit there and talk about horrible movies, and it doesn't make any difference. You still want to just sit there and listen to the guy. He's excellent. One of my favorite video makers on YouTube. So if you love movies as I do, check out Daisuke Beppu. Okay. I just want, again, last video I complained about what I don't like. So today I'm going to talk about what I do like. Okay, so officially now, without further ado, what time is it? Okay, we're doing all right. Yeah, anyway. I would like to talk about a couple of records that I pulled out of my stacks. Lately, I've been pulling out some old 90s era records that I have. I don't know if I talked about this in a previous video, but I started DJing in 1990 when I was still in high school, and it was just this thing. Growing up in the early 90s and coming of age in the early 90s was a great time to be buying records and being into the rave scene and dance culture. It was a fantastic time to be buying records, as is proven today in 2021, because every time I look up these records and see what they're priced at, my mind is blown. I can't believe what this stuff is worth today. And that's what inspired me to pull these two records out of my stacks. One of my favorite artists, and he doesn't need any introduction, is Aphex Twin, Richard James. I will talk about my intro with Richard James and how I learned to be aware of him and how I felt about him over the years. And I'm going to talk about two records in particular. I'm going to talk about these two. The Selected Ambient Works records. Both very worthy of picking up. Although, when I get to it, I will point out that one of these records is insanely rare, way more rare than I ever thought it was. And Well, anyway, I'll get into that. So I first heard Aphex as Power Pill. He recorded under this name Power Pill, and the name of the track was Pac-Man. And it came out, I want to say, in 91. I have it somewhere. I do have this record. I don't know where it is right now. But he put out this rave tune, and it was basically literally a rave song with Pac-Man samples over it. Nothing to write home about. It's fun, it's stupid, it's goofy. It reminds you of every goofy rave tune that came out in the early 90s. That was my intro to Richard James. I didn't even know it was him. Aphex Twin wasn't even a name. I don't think Polygon Window was a name either. I don't think, no one knew who Richard James was yet. He wasn't Aphex Twin yet. And then shortly after that, he would start releasing Aphex Twin records. He put out Didgeridoo and Xylem Tube, which I have those over there. I'll talk about those at a different time. So at that time, though, Aphex was a curiosity. He had Analog Bubble Bath was also out, so people were starting to realize who this guy was. But obviously, he wasn't the god and legend he is now. That was in the early 90s, 91, 92, that stuff was happening. So everyone was starting to become aware of Richard James's music and how it was very rave-themed and influenced. But in 92, this came out. This is Selected Ambient Works. This is on Apollo Records. I bought this in 1992, and this album really blew my mind. It just did. I know it's an easy thing to say. Everyone knows Aphex Twin now. But this, if you were listening to this almost 30 years ago, this was truly music from an alien planet. It came from nowhere and was wholly original. There was nothing, and in my mind, there's still nothing that sounds like this music. On Selected Ambient Works, 85 to 92 is the name of it. Me personally, as a 19-year-old kid who bought and listened to this, was blown away. It was a stunning realization of what dance music could be. Because up until that point, dance music was just dance music. It was big and loud and bombastic and disco influenced, or this influenced, or that influenced. But this was the first time that dance music had a strong ambient tint to it. I also want to point out that it's called Selected Ambient Works, but this really isn't, it's not an ambient album. It's just not. I will argue this with anybody. It's not an ambient record. It's a techno record. Yes, it has foundations in ambient music, and it's called Ambient Works. But it's really not an ambient record. It's not. It's not. It's a dance record. It's a techno album, rooted in ambience, but on the surface and at its roots, it's a dance record. But it was one of the first times, at least, that I heard, along with a few other releases that I'll talk about at some other point. But it was the first release that was head music. It was dance music, but it was something you could listen to at home. It made sense to listen to at home and not dance. You know, it stimulated your brain intellectually. You could sit there and listen to it. And it was very complex rhythmically. The melodies are all over the place, but very catchy. It was just it was a real breakthrough. It was a real breakthrough, and I wasn't the only one to feel this way. This was a big record then, and it is now. I think it's been repressed countless times. This original version on Apollo, though, I looked this up. The original one is going for anywhere in the $200 to $400 range, which it's insane. You can repress these records as much as you want. It doesn't make any difference. They still want those originals. It's like the movie High Fidelity when John Cusack says, you know, people want original pressings of Smith's albums and Frank Zappa albums. It's the same in electronic music. Doesn't matter. You can repress it all you want. People still want those originals. Repressing it doesn't lesser the value at all on these original pressings. But at any rate, Ambient Works 85 to 92 really blew my mind. It was, yeah, for me personally, it was a real revelation, and it was the start of that whole, for me, it was the start of that whole thing with Autechre and Square Pusher and Warp Records. You know, Warp Records, too, in the early days was just a dance label, really. They weren't doing any ambient stuff. They weren't doing any real experimental stuff at all. It was all pretty much rave music and dance music and house and techno. 4-to-the-floor beats. That's what Warp did. And then Aphex Twin came along and they signed him, and you know, they signed Autechre too, and you know, acts like Richie Houghton and you know, B12 and Black Dog. Those bands also, just as much as Aphex and Autechre, they solidified the foundation that is Warp. But Aphex, you know, Aphex is Aphex. He's at the top of that mountain. He's popular for a reason. I think one of the reasons he is popular, he has an aura to him. He's mysterious. He does goofy shit. He used to buy tanks. He would do interviews in helicopters. You know, he's got a very unique sense of humor, as we all know. However, back then, when nobody knew anything about Aphex Twin, nobody knew who Richard James was, this selected ambient works 85 to 92, as I said before, was a real revelation. It was a stunning work, and it still is a stunning work. I love this album then. When I think of my favorite Aphex releases, I always go to this first album of his. I felt that then, and I still feel it now. It's just such a beautiful piece of work. Such a fully realized, beautifully written, again, melodically and rhythmically, and the harmonies. For a kid to be making this music, which he was, I think he was 20 when he did this, it's real stunning, really stunning to consider that this guy had all this rattling around in his head, especially coming from that rave background to just come up with stuff like this. I do remember an interesting interview too with Alex Patterson of The Orb at the time. I want to say it was in the NME or maybe Jockey Slut, something. Alex Patterson was talking about this album in particular, and he was saying that, again, this is Alex Patterson saying this, but I read an interview at the time where he said he didn't believe that any of this music was made in 85 or 86. He said the equipment that is used on this album, some of it wasn't available in 85. Now, again, I don't know. I don't have those kinds of ears for gear and music. But Alex Patterson was convinced that Richard James was shitting the public, basically, by suggesting that any of this music was made as early as 1985. I thought it was interesting. Who knows? But Patterson had a very distinct opinion. He loved the music. He wasn't saying he didn't like the music, but he was doubting Richard James's honesty when it came to when he made it. And let's face it, it's Richard James. He's known to be full of shit. But it doesn't matter. This is a great example of early head music in the electronic world. Dance music that you could listen to at home. It's an everyday thing now. Everybody knows about it now. But in 92, people didn't know this. Music like this didn't exist. It just didn't. So that's my piece on 85 to 92 ambient works. Now, this is the one that blew my mind. This is, you know, this is Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. Now, I didn't, up until the last few days when I've been researching this, I pulled this out of my archives. I'm learning a bit about this release. This was pressed on brown colored vinyl, and it was at the time it was tagged as limited edition, super limited edition brown vinyl. This is on black vinyl though, and apparently the black vinyl is more rare than the brown vinyl. Again, yeah, it was. Here's the. I don't know if you can. Well, I'm all over the place right now. I'll try to focus on what I'm talking about. But this black vinyl is actually more rare than the brown. And I guess this black in near mint condition, which is what this is in, this is like a $500-600 record in near mint minus condition, which this is. Again, news to me. I remember at the time I had a choice between getting the brown and the black. I have always chosen to get black over any other color because black just sounds better. There's a reason why the majority of records are black. The chemicals in black vinyl just don't emit what the colored vinyl do. The only color other than black that sounds good is clear. So if you see something on clear or black vinyl, get it. But I've always avoided anything like blue and red and pink and purple and all that. If there's a black variant, I will always go with black. This is the insert. However, anyway, this record's a real holy grail, and I'll talk about it for a few minutes. When this album came out, and there's the sticker. Yeah. When this album came out in '94, I wasn't quite prepared for it. It's a 3-record set, and every side of vinyl on here is over 25 minutes. This is almost a 3-hour-long album. There's a lot to sink in with this album. And when it came out in '94, I think I was just expecting more, of Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92, more dance beats and more techno. But this came out, and yeah, at the time, I will admit I didn't love it. And I think I just wasn't ready to hear it. I think we all had those moments when an album comes out and we do like it, but we get inundated with it, and it becomes something that we're not ready to accept it as, or there's a band that we really enjoy and we do like them, but it's just so heavily played that we get sick of it. Bands like Nirvana pop up, or Radiohead. Those bands put out great albums, but sometimes you just don't want to hear it. It's so overplayed, you start to kind of hate it. And then years later, when you're ready to hear it, you listen to it with new ears, and then it makes more sense. You're like, oh, you're right. This is a great album. I just needed to be ready to hear it. That's kind of how I feel about this. This album came out in '94, and I just think that I wasn't ready to hear it because I didn't love it when I first heard it. But over the years, and I just played this today, actually. I recorded it so I can have it, in my digital archives. I recorded this today, and this is a wonderful album. I always liked it, but I've always considered it to be a bit overrated. Everyone always touts this as one of the greatest ambient albums ever made, and I've always kind of, I don't know, I've always kind of bristled at that. I haven't agreed with it, but when I listened to it today, I think I was just ready to hear it. And everything started falling into place. I really started recognizing it for just how unbelievably original this is. Yes, this is a true ambient album. To call this ambient album and to call the 85 to 92 an ambient album, I don't know how you can do that. They're completely different records. This is a true ambient masterpiece. It really is. There are some songs in here that just bring up such memories and emotions for me. All of the tracks, I'll pull this out again. The concept with this album is fantastic too. You will see that the tracks don't have names. They're images. So there are 4 tracks on this side, so you see 4 images. Again, 4 tracks on that side, you see 4 images. And when Richard James released this album, and this is, again, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but at the time I remember reading an interview with him where he was lucid dreaming. He made this music as he was lucid dreaming, basically meaning he was sleeping an hour or 2 a night and forcing himself to wake up, and he was in this like zoned out dream-like state, and he would get up in the middle of the night after only sleeping an hour or 2, and he'd make this music that he heard in his dreams. Whether he really did that, who knows? But this music definitely sounds like it's possible because it's very dreamy, very dreamlike. It definitely puts you in a certain mood. Very relaxing, but also kind of disturbing and weird. Lots of distorted vocals and children laughing and weird out-of-tune synthesizer sounds, but it works. It's just really, he turns these disparate, edgy, odd influences and turns it into a really heartbreakingly beautiful experience. Here's the second record. We have 4 more images. There's Oh, this one has 5. The blue one there, it's called Blue Culks. That's the only one, that's the only track on this album that has a name. There are 25 tracks on this record. Oh, also, that reminds me, when I was looking this up, this got repressed. It was bootlegged by a label called 1972, I guess, a number of years ago. And they sourced it from the CD. And what I just learned today, actually, when I looked this up, is that the CD version does not have 2 tracks that are only on this. And when 1972 did their repress, they based their repress on the CD version. So that's further reason to, I mean, look, if you have $500, by all means, pick this up. If you have $500 to spend. But this has two extra tracks that are not on any other version. And the 2 tracks that are on here, I guess the songs that are not on the CD are tracks A4, which is good, and then E2, which blows my mind, because track E2 is one of the great Aphex Twin songs. I am stunned that that didn't get a release on the CDs and on the repress. It blows my mind. You can only find it on this original vinyl, I guess. That's what I read. So anyway, I discovered this. I knew I had it, but when I pulled it out and actually looked it up, I was like, whoa! I think I paid 25 bucks for this, folks. I bought this new back in 94. I was a kid. I was 21 years old. 25 bucks, man. Going for 500 now. How do you like that? It's a fucking weird world, but I kind of get it, man. We're talking about ambient music, and this is every bit as beautiful than any Brian Eno album I've ever heard. Didn't love it at the time, didn't love it over the years, but the last few years has really been growing on me. I used to work for a music site. I'm not going to mention their name because I don't like them. I think they're bad, shitty people, and I don't want to promote them at all. But I used to be the main content. I was the content editor for the site, and I was the main blog writer and content writer for the site. And I did a top 10 ambient records list. And I didn't include this because I just thought it was too obvious. Everyone knew it. I thought there were 10 other records that were better. And, you know, I think I could still probably make an argument that there are 10 ambient albums that are better than this. By the way, my favorite ambient album of all time is Chill Out by the KLF. I'll talk about that at another point. Nothing gets better than Chill Out. But if I were to do that list again, I wrote that list about 6 years ago. If I were to write that again today, I'd put this on the top 10 list. I fucked up there. I got too cute. I overthought it and I didn't put that on the list. And people in the community who read my top 10 list, they were barking at me for not including this. And I argued with them. And I pleaded with them. And I was wrong. So if anybody ever read that list and you yelled at me for not putting this on the list, you were right. I was wrong. I fucked up. This should have been on there. Anyway, I wanted to talk about these records because Aphex Twin means a lot to me. I've got every little weird thing he's ever done. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, these two albums, look, if you're into electronic music, you have to have these two in some form or another. If you don't have $500 to drop on this, hey, I understand this. But you should find some version of it out there if you can. Oh, and by the way, Warp. Why are you not re-releasing this? I mean, $500. I love having this. I mean, I love having it even more now, trust me. But repress this, man. People want this. Why would you not repress this? His later records have been repressed. Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92 has been repressed. Why have you not repressed this? There must be a reason, right? Who knows what that could be? Anyway, that is where I'm at tonight. Thank you for listening. It was an Aphex Twin night. I just, again, wanted to, when I saw what this record was going for, I wanted to definitely talk about it and discuss how I've felt about it over the years and how my thoughts and attitudes and emotions have changed over the years while listening to it. But I must tell you today, when I was digitizing it, you know, listening to a few tracks, it really reminded me of how beautiful the music is on Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. Particularly the A3 track. The A3 track. I was almost moved to tears earlier when I was listening to this. Not just the memories, but just the haunting melody. It's so simple, but so heartbreaking, so beautiful. Just to think that a 22-year-old kid was coming up with this kind of music. It's just really mind-blowing how brilliant Richard James is. So lucky to have this guy in our world putting out music. Even still, that's great. The other song on the album, well, it was the entire E side, side 5, side E, whatever. Every song on side E, too. Beautiful stuff. And again, the fact that E2 is not available on the CD or any of the repressing, the vinyl represses, man, crazy. If you have the money, go and buy a version of Selected Ambient Works Volume 2. I wouldn't recommend getting the brown vinyl, though. It's just, colored vinyl just doesn't sound as good. And this music is very delicate and very quiet. You want to have a good, solid, quiet pressing. It's important. It's like classical music, this. You want to have a silent, quiet, well done, well mastered pressing. So yeah, that's my piece for today. If you've got a spare $800, $900, by all means, go out and buy these two. If not, check it out in any means you have, any means you can. Check these records out. It's definitely worth every moment of your time. All right, thank you very much. I'll talk to you next time.